Welcome again, everybody, to Tom Talks. Today, I'm going to tell you about biogeography. And you're probably going, Tom, there's Australia, and it says Sahul. What does that have to do with Michigan? And what the heck is biogeography? Well, stay tuned and find out. All right, you're wondering why is there Australia in the background? I'm going to show you today a concept called biogeography, and it's basically the study of where plants and animals live and why. What caused them to live where they did. The reason why I'm showing you Australia is because the scientist, his name was Alfred Wallace. You're probably like, I've never heard this guy. Who is this guy? Well, he actually came up with a theory of evolution. But wait, didn't Darwin do that? Yes, he did. They both did it at the same time. The thing is, Darwin published his stuff first and gets full credit. But Wallace, he's a really cool guy, did a lot of traveling. And what he discovered when he visited Indonesia and Australia, he saw a clear line between where Australian animals lived and where Indonesian animals lived. Now, the thing is, the climate's the same, the plants are pretty much the same in this area, but there is a clear line between some of these islands going through this part of the ocean. And they call that today the Wallace Line. Now, how does that relate here to Michigan? Well, stay tuned. I'll show you here in a second. All right, I'm back. So, Michigan, is there a Wallace Line here? Well, not really. We have similar climate from the southern part all the way to the UP overall. Yeah, it's pretty cold up in the UP to get more snow. But we do have some things that kind of shape where animals can be here in Michigan. And there's two things. One is pretty obvious. If you look at the map, what do we have? If you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you. We've got two peninsulas here in Michigan, and they're divided by the Straits of Mackinac. So that is a physical barrier that keeps some animals from going from the south into the UP and, believe it or not, from the UP down into lower Michigan. There's another line, if you will, and we call it a, gotta clear my throat for this one, a thermocline. What is a thermocline? It's basically a line of average temperature. So on this map, if I took my finger from Muskegon and go to Midland, the thermocline, or the average year-round temperature at that line, is 47 degrees. And what has happened there is the plants in that area, we call that a tension zone, because there's tension between the northern plants and the southern plants. So you go north of that line, and you're like, hey, there's a lot more pine trees up here. That's part of the tension zone. It's cool enough for them and probably too warm down south. And vice versa. You'll get more southern stuff down in the southern lower peninsula. For example, you may remember there are two species of poison ivy in Michigan. You draw a line across. There's one that lives north of that. There's one that lives south of that. So this tension zone sets up the plant life and your major ecosystems, and then the animals either don't care which one they live in, like, oh, I don't know, a crow. There are some, and I'll show you a couple here in a minute, that prefer the lower peninsula, don't go to the UP. There are some that stay pretty much south of that line as well. So we have the Wallace Line, which is a major biogeographical line, and then we have subtle ones as well. And I'm going to show you some examples here in just a second. All right, look at all those blue dots. Those are observations of the Canada jay. Canada jay is a northern species of bird, and as you notice, hasn't been observed in the lower peninsula. So, what is the barrier? It's the Straits of Mackinac. Jays, as a general rule, they don't like crossing water. Canada jays especially. And we have yet to have an observation in the lower peninsula. Another interesting example is the American beech. Now, the American beech are found in Michigan, but as you see by its map, It is found throughout the lower peninsula, but only in the eastern half of the upper peninsula. As a matter of fact, you'll barely find any in Marquette County, Menominee County, and Dickinson County. It is thought that the soil type changes enough in this area that they just can't grow in the soils that are in the western UP. So soils can be a dividing line between where plants and or some animals can live. You may remember from last week, poison ivy. Yes, there are two species in Michigan. I mentioned one that lived in the UP in the northern lower and another one that lived in the southern lower. Well, let's go back to that tension zone or that 47-degree thermocline line, which essentially runs between Bay City and Muskegon. Some plants, they can tolerate a little bit cooler weather, and maybe that's the case with this species of poison ivy. But in any case, there is a temperature line that is probably keeping these guys from going north, and probably something to do with the soils as well, because our soils get sandier as we get north of this transition line as well. And let me show you an interesting example of biogeography. This is the pitcher's thistle. It is an endangered species here in Michigan, and check out its range map. Look at that, right along the lake shore on the Great Lakes. And it's also in the UP in sandy areas. This is a sandy dune plant. And, well, where do we have sand dunes? Well, along the lakes. And that's why you only find them along the lake shore. So it is restricted to sand dunes. That's where it thrives. It will not thrive inland, obviously, because we don't have any inland records of the pitcher's thistle. So why does all of this matter? Well, if you are a hiker in Michigan, especially a long-distance hiker or a section hiker of the North Country Trail especially, if you're moving along and through great distances across the landscape, you are going to notice some changes in the ecosystems, habitats, and plants and animals. So when you're hiking north, you're in the southern lower peninsula, which is, we call that a Carolinian forest, which is mostly deciduous trees, dominates with some prairies. And then, as you can see on the blue lines, that is the transition zone. That is where things go from a Carolinian or mostly deciduous to what we call a mixed forest type, which is deciduous and pine, like jack pine, red pine, and white pine. You're going to see more northern species north of this blue line. So as a recap, the Wallace Line. The Wallace Line goes between two islands. You'll see Bali and Lombok. And there's been some adjustments over time with this line. So west of this line, you have tigers and orangutans and rhinoceros and all kinds of cool animals like that. And then east and south of that line, it's Australian animals. It's marsupials, kangaroos and wombats and things like that. So what kept the animals from going between these two? Well, as the oceans would fluctuate over time due to glaciation, now keep in mind the ocean level was much lower 15,000 years ago, land bridges formed between a lot of these islands, but they did not form where that Wallace Line is. That is a deep trench, so there was always water there, so these animals did not cross over this boundary, and that led to isolation of marsupials in the Australian archipelago and more animals like placental mammals like tigers and orangutans up in Asia. So that line is just a demarcation of separation between two groups of animals based on being isolated from each other over time. And we have similar things here in Michigan, and I hope that you'll appreciate that. And next time you're out and about, you'll see examples of it as you're hiking. All right, thanks for watching, you guys. You can follow me at a Patreon account, Patreon/TomFunk. I'm also now on Substack, where I'm basically taking all these podcasts I've been making and all these YouTube videos I've been making. I'm also typing it up and I'm putting it in a blog format so you can just read it as well. But in any case, bottom of the screen at this video says subscribe. Click it. Doesn't cost anything. Makes you feel a little good. If you don't like what you've been seeing, just take the link and send it to somebody you don't like, okay? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Tom's Tales and Tom Funk's Worldly Adventures.